doing a large trial right now in, let me just pull this up because I have a good estimate from the trial.
Okay.
We're doing a large trial treating patients with BCG. And where's my protocol? And we had an estimated 1-year disease-free survival. Let me just check that, see what that is. Okay. So based on, all right, 1-year recurrence-free survival rate is 75%. So that means that standard patients with Ta/T1 disease getting BCG, 25% of them will recur in the first year. Okay, so then the rest of them, a total of 40%, will recur, over the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So basically, at 5 years, you have about a 40% recurrence rate, 25% within the first year.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Really helps put it in context. Thank you. So when you have patients who either don't respond or have a recurrence, what's the next step in treatment after that first round or the first session of BCG, I guess?
Yeah. So if you're, it depends on where you're at and what kind of philosophy you take. The standard of care is that patients should be considered for radical cystectomy. The alternative is valrubicin, and it's FDA approved for patients with CIS, but it has also been used for patients with TA and T1, even though it's not FDA approved. So radical cystectomy, valrubicin, or repeat BCG plus or minus interferon. It's not FDA approved, but it is done. Or clinical trial. In my practice, patients go on a clinical trial. That said, the biggest issue here is that the majority of patients that are quote unquote BCG unresponsive or have failed BCG have actually just received inadequate BCG. So at least where I'm located, what will happen is in the private sector, patients will get 6 weeks of BCG and nothing else. They get a tumor, they do fine for a period of time. A tumor comes back 6 months later, they send them to me because they're quote unquote BCG unresponsive, when in fact they just received inadequate BCG. And so what I have to do is re-resect them, start them back on BCG and give them the proper regimen. So the big issue here is that the community is not convinced, and it's not been widely practiced, of giving maintenance therapy. So a lot of people in the community give 6 weeks of induction, and that's all they'll give. And so does not meet FDA requirements for BCG unresponsive disease.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And we had I think in the materials provided the FDA guideline on what is unresponsive and what's adequate BCG therapy, and I think you just confirmed that that's what the standard should be, but it's often not met in the community practice. Okay.
That is the biggest problem right now nationwide, is that there's not a consensus. Well, there's a consensus. There's just not standardization of giving BCG. And so what we see a lot of times is that they just have been given an inadequate amount of BCG, so they don't qualify for these trials.
I see.